Hey guys, we're going to look at how to find the distance between points using a graph. So let's start with question number 1 on your note sheet. It says we're going to graph the following places: Starbucks, which is at 6, 3, and we're going to label it with an S for Starbucks so we remember which one it is. So remember, when we are graphing things, we're going to do ordered pairs are X and then Y. So we're going to go across and then up and down. So 6 across and 3 up would put us right here. That is our Starbucks. And then we're going to put the grocery store at 2, 3. So +2, +3. And that is G for grocery store. All right, so now we can answer our questions. So first thing it says is we are going to identify which quadrant each point is in. So S, the Starbucks, is in quadrant 1 because it is positive, positive. So quadrant 1, remember we're writing these with Roman numerals. And the grocery store is also positive, positive, so it is also in quadrant 1. Okay, which values are different in the ordered pairs X or Y? So let's look at it. We're comparing 6, 3 and 2, 3. So I can see the 3's are matching up. Those are the same. The thing that's different is the 6 and the 2, which those are our X coordinates. So X is what is different in our ordered pair. Okay, now it says I'm going to use the absolute value to help find the distance. What does that even mean? So I'm going to look at the absolute value of those two numbers that are different. And so I have 6, the absolute value of 6, and the absolute value of 2. Okay, the absolute value of 6 is positive 6. The absolute value of 2 is positive 2. And we're going to do something with these numbers. So I can either add these or subtract these. Well, if I look up here at the graph, I can see that if I add them, 6 plus 2 is 8, and this is not 8 spaces away. But if I subtract them, 6 minus 2 is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that sounds correct. So I'm going to put 6 minus 2. And for our last question, how far are these places from each other? They are 4 units away. So for this, since they're graphed, you really can just count how far apart they are, like how many jumps it takes. 1, 2, 3, 4. But I don't want you to have to do that every time, especially when I start to give you really big numbers or I don't give you a graph at all. So we're going to start to notice this pattern of doing something with the absolute values and getting how far apart the two things are from each other. Okay, so let's go on to the second graph. Okay, same idea. So we're going to graph Dunkin' Donuts at -3, +1, so 3 to the left and up 1. Here it is, and we are labeling that D for Dunkin' Donuts. Then home is at +4, +1, so 4 to the right and 1 up. There is home, H for home. So let's identify which quadrant each point is in. So D is negative, positive, which puts it in the second quadrant. So fill in 2. And your home is positive, positive, which is the first quadrant. Okay, which values are different in the ordered pair? So this time I can see -3, 1 and 4, 1. It looks like the 1's are matching. The -3 and the +4 are different, so that is again the X that is different. And again, it wants us to use the absolute value to help find the distance. So I have the absolute value of -3 and the absolute value of +4, because we want to use the two numbers that are different from each other. So the absolute value of -3, remember absolute value is making it positive, so it's a +3. And the absolute value of +4 is still +4. Okay, so again, we want to use those two numbers to help us figure out the distance between these. So again, I can already see if I just kind of count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces away on my graph. So what could I do to get 7 with a 3 and a 4? well, I can add them this time. So 3 plus 4, which will tell me that that is 7 units apart. All right, let's look on the back. So the first question, they've got this whole graph, like a little map here. So the first question says, how far is the art museum from the animal shelter? So our art museum is, let's see, right here. And our animal shelter is right here. So let's see how far apart those two things are. So 1, 2, 3 spaces apart. So 3 units from the art museum to the animal shelter. Okay, now let's look at the second question. How far is the police station from the hospital? So the police station is right here and the hospital here. And let's see how far apart those two are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spaces. So 6 units apart. Okay, and we've got one more. How far is the police station, which is right here, from City Hall? Why don't you go ahead and see if you can count that before I do it with you. All right, so if I'm going from the police station up to City Hall, 1, 2, 3, 4 units apart. All right, so as we were doing the first two problems on the front, I'm wondering if you noticed how we were working with those numbers. So we were using the absolute values, but one of the times we added and one of the times we subtracted. So there's actually a rule as to why we did each one so that you don't have to look at the graph every time. So for our first rule, it says if 2 points are in the same quadrant, well, if you look back at number 1, those were the same quadrant and we subtracted them. That will always be true. So if 2 points are in the same quadrant, we subtract, and you're always using that absolute value, so making your numbers positive and then just subtracting the bigger one minus the smaller one. Okay, then for the second one, if 2 points are in different quadrants, so like number 2 on the front, those are in different quadrants, well, that time we added. So if the 2 points are in different quadrants, we add. And a nice way to remember this, if you get a little bit confused, the S for same matches the S for subtract, the D for different matches the D here in add. That's just how I remember it. All right, so now that we have our rule and we don't need a graph to be able to do it, I should be able to give you some really big numbers and you can still do the same thing. So I'll walk through how we're going to do this with the first one and then we'll see if you can do it. So our first question is 618 and 6 negative 22. So what I need to do first is decide if these are in the same quadrant or in different quadrants. The fastest way to do that is just to look at the signs. So if they're both the same signs, both ordered pairs have the same signs, then it's the same quadrant. If something about the signs are different, then they're in different quadrants. So the first one is positive, positive. The second one is positive, negative. So I can see that those are not the same. So they must be in different quadrants. Well, different quadrants we're going to add. So I don't care about the 6 since those 6's match, and I'm not worried about that. It's the two numbers that are different. So the 18 and the 22, that's what I'm going to use to solve it. So I'm going to use the absolute value of 18 plus the absolute value of negative 22. Well, that's really just 18 plus 22, which gives me 40 units. Since they didn't tell me if it was miles or anything like that, we just always call it units. Okay, so those two are 40 units apart. All right, I'm going to do one more with you and then we'll let you see how you do on the others. So for the second problem, I'm going to look, are they in the same or different quadrants? So this one's a negative, negative. This one's also a negative, negative. So since they're both using the same signs, I know that they're in the same quadrant, so I'm going to subtract them. So again, these negative 11s, they match, so I'm not worried about those, but I am going to use my absolute value of negative 52 and my my absolute value of negative 124. Okay, so that gives me positive 52 and positive 124. And we said they're in the same quadrant, so we need to subtract them. So really I actually need to flip-flop these around because I need to have the bigger number first. So what I'm really going to do is positive 124 minus 52. Okay, and I'm going to have to do that subtraction over here off to the side, so let me make myself a little bit of space. So I've got 124 minus 52. Let's do some borrowing. 12 minus 5 is 7, so 72 units away. Okay. All right, why don't you go ahead and pause the video here and see if you can do the last two on your note sheet, and when you're all done, come back and we'll go through them. All right, hopefully you went ahead and did the last two, so let's go through them. So I can see for this first one, it is a negative number and then a 0, so that's kind of weird because 0 is not positive or negative. That might have confused you, but I can see here on the other one it was a positive for the first number, so I can already tell they're not in the same quadrant or even on the same axis. Okay, so if they're different, I'm going to add them. So I'm going to take my absolute value of negative 75 plus my absolute value of 49. Well, that's really just 75 plus 49. Okay, write that off to the side so I can actually add it. And 14, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So I'm getting 124 units for number 3. Okay, and one last problem. Let's look at this last one. So again, the 0 might have thrown you off, but I can see that it is something. It's 0 and then positive, positive, and then positive. So if that confused you, really let's think about it. If I take the absolute value of 0 and the absolute value of 18, okay, well, I'm going to get 0 and 18. If I add these, I'm going to get 18 for my answer. If I subtract them, I'm going to get 18 for my answer. So it didn't really matter. When it's on an axis like that, that might confuse you a little bit, but it doesn't matter if you add or subtract because you're going to get the same answer. Okay, so let's just say we add them and we get 18 units for the last problem. All right, so you are all done. You can go ahead and do your practice.